Hello. Um, so I am going to give you a presentation of some comic book artists whose figure drawing I think is exceptional and does an excellent job of communicating uh, feeling and has solid contributes to the storytelling. Um, so I'm going to show you Will Eisner and a few other illustrators and comic book artists, and I'm going to kind of deconstruct and try to communicate to you what the essence of a good gesture is, and what figure drawing should look like in comics, ideally. So let's get started. I'm going to start with Will Eisner. Um, so Will Eisner, uh, if you look at his anatomy, it's not photorealistic. It's cartoony. It has elements of realism, but it is predominantly a very fluid sort of figure drawing. The weight distribution of the character is really clear, and you get a sense that there's movement. A lot of that is done through the kind of line work. Um, but a good solid figure drawing in comics, at least in my, it sounds so pretentious to say that. At least as I see it, means that there should be a nice fluid gesture drawing that underpins pretty much every figure. Um, and so one thing about Will Eisner that is different about a lot of other uh, comic book artists is his expressive anatomy is he uses the figure to convey feelings that you would suspect could only be done through the face, through facial expressions. But if you lay out a page and just have a bunch of facial expressions to communicate what's going on and how people are feeling, it'll it gets boring to look at. It's hard to look at. So one area that comics differs from like film is that we want to rely on the whole body to express, kind of like stage, theater, that kind of a thing, rather than like a close up of an angry face. Close up of angry faces, they do work, but I think that Will Eisner does a good job of really pushing how the figure can communicate things emotionally. So, whoop, sorry, skipped ahead. You can see this guy is walking along. I'll click point here. He's walking along. He is buying hot dogs and he is getting distracted by pizza and just having a good old time. And you can tell just the way that he's walking, he's indulging in his the loving food, and he's kind of aloof. The way that anybody is when they're kind of in experiencing bliss, pleasure based bliss. And all of that is communicated just through the pacing and the figure. And then he comes home, and his wife is cooking the meal, and he has a scared look on his face. But you can see he just kind of stands there stiffly and impotent. Here he's so fluid. Here he's kind of stiff and impotent. Um, and he's using an angry face here, but I think just given the context, the angry face isn't what's communicating that she's upset. You could discern that, or that she will be upset. You could discern all of that based on his body language and the placement of this nice meal here in the foreground. So I'm going to move forward to the next one. Uh, so this is a gesture drawing. Well, it's not a gesture drawing; it's a completed drawing. But there is a strong gestural underpinning for it. Uh, what you can see is that a lot of the movement is communicated through gestural lines. Um, he's not using a ton of rendering, right? He just uses them, they get fat, they get thin. There's a sense of movement. He's not. You don't get the sense that he's stiffly standing there holding a pose. You can tell he's in the middle of a movement, and you can tell how his weight is distributed. Also, this background here, these characters running, right? Most people aren't leaned over like that when they run, but if you just push and pull with gestural drawing, you get these nice little exaggerations that are, just right. Um, this is low res. Here's another gesture. So one of the things I like about Will Eisner, you can find his pencils pretty easily. There's a book they published that are just his pencils, like probably 10 or 15 years ago, and they're pretty great. Um, these pencils here are for the spirit, and he kept it loose. He did not tighten up these drawings because keeping it loose, even in the pencil stage, facilitates a sort of movement in the completed figure, even when you're tightly inking them. These are more pencils. They're not showing up too great on here, but they're gestural. Here's another low-res image, something he drew. So this is from a book, Life Force, that he did. I like this book. I think the anatomy is very expressive, and there's not a ton of action in it. It's a lot of just people talking, which is not ideal for this medium. There's a lot, comics is very conducive to action. Dramatic kind of monologue is not so much, but I thought that he did a great job with subtle acting. He has the right mixture of subtlety and expressiveness that helps communicate what the character is feeling as they're talking. I think that this is a great example of just the range of feelings and senses that can be communicated merely through drawing. Here's another portion of it, and this is also a bit of the pacing. If you line up panels that are roughly the same size and roughly the same composition, you get a sense that time is passing. But there is a synergy between the text and the image, and that is kind of what we're going for. Here again, we have him doing more. These have strong gestural underpinnings that express emotion, and that is kind of what we are going for. Again, this woman is tasting her food. I thought this was a nice image. Just these little things sticking up the pinky. I love it. All right. And then here again, the being flooded with loving feelings. That intensity of a new love, all being communicated in this ice skating part that Will Eisner drew. And again, strong gestural underpinning. This really communicates a lot of feeling. The weight distribution is perfect, and he's doing some challenging things, drawing people off balance in just the right way. Really some powerful stuff, and I think really demonstrates the power of cartooning as opposed to realism. I am going to finish talking about some more artists who I think have very good gestural underpinning for their illustrations and comic book pages. So I'm going to start with Jaw Cooper. I initially found her on Instagram and read a lot of interviews. She is a commercial illustrator, and a lot of the work I'm going to show you is not work that she does for her job. It's for her side projects, which her side projects are, pretty kind of well known and robust. So I really love the way that she drew this Sphinx cat. And in fact, the main character in my book is a Sphinx cat because I was inspired by her drawings of them. Now, the ones that I draw are very different than hers. I don't draw like her, but I thought that the way that she handled this was beautiful. She doesn't draw a ton of human figures, um, but she does draw a lot of animals, and the gesture and the sense of movement is stellar. Um, she has a good understanding of animal anatomy, but really the gesture is what I think sells it. Um, I love this drawing. And here's some others. Here's a human figure. I'm getting really skilled. Lots of gesture, and I like how she has the gesture, but then her figures are really lean, which means that you're also going to see a lot of bone. And that's something I used to struggle with, where it was easier to draw like heavier, rounder people and make them have a sense of movement. But when you're drawing like lean, thin people, you have to show muscle and bone, and those are hard structures. So how do you do that and still make them look like active and like they're moving? I think Joel Cooper achieves this quite well. Um, her and like James Jean. Here's another. I think this is a sketch out of her sketchbook. I think this is done in gouache. Again, I love the way she draws these Sphinx cats. Um, I'm working on a comic right now with the Sphinx cat, and I am just envious of how well she does them. Her line work really helps with the gesture, and what you can see is that this is not a quick sketch. This is a finished sort of drawing almost, right? Um, so what you can see is that she still has the quick movement in her line work as though it were a rough sketch. And it is the fact that she chose to keep these lines right in their place, especially around the Sphinx cat's neck and shoulder. Um, those really have a lot of movement there and really are communicating a lot. Um, I don't know what this thing is, but I love it. Yeah, it's beautiful. And again, she's using a brush pen here, and has really masterful decisions about what lines to use where. Um, the creature is still here, but there's still a sense of movement. Um, so again, she highly stylized figures. They're always really quite lean. Um, and there's a good balance of showing structure with movement. Something I really admire about her work. Um, and mixing the owls and the tigers. I don't know what this is for exactly, but I just thought there was a lot of solid movement in here, and thought I'd throw it in. Again, more of those that kind of a bony figure. I like it. I think it works. I'm really impressed by it, and I love the background critters. I don't know what's behind him, but it's kind of cute and eerie in a neat way. So, again, there's a lot of drama and movement here. I have no idea what this is for or what the idea behind it was, but it's pretty cool. Um, the line work here is just amazing. she's really economic. There's not a lot of rendering, but what she does throw in really contributes to the sense of movement and form, which is what we want in a gesture. Movement and form. These are sketches. I don't know. Yeah. These are sketches she did. I thought they demonstrate excellent line work, especially, man, that pug in the lower left corner, economically sketched, real sense of movement. I just feel like I know that dog that lays that way. Same with the others. Um, there really is a beautiful sense of movement and gesture that underpins all these. And I think that just showing the variety of animals that she can draw goes to show you don't have to have a thorough, worked out understanding of anatomy. You can kind of have a haphazard understanding, and if you throw it on top of a solid gesture, it'll it can look really nice. Sometimes the gesture is better than reality. Yuko Shimizu. So this is not the Yuko Shimizu that did Hello Kitty. This illustrator is also Japanese. She's an editorial illustrator, really well known. Tom probably knows her. She teaches at SVA. I love her work. I really look up to her and Tomer Hanuka when I was really aggressively doing illustration, and I think that her sense of gesture is solid, really wonderful. She makes some interesting decisions. Her inking is also really crazy because of she uses obscure brush and an obscure kind of paper, from what I understand. But if you look at her line work and the sense of movement, these little girls doing whatever they're doing, you really get a sense that of weight and gesture. That these are very deliberate movements. I don't know. I love it. I love the way she did the hair here. Again, more Yuko. Yeah. So one of the things that I've always found impressive about her is she will have a sense of movement with these extremely foreshortened figures that are distorted with from linear perspective. When I was learning to do this kind of a thing, I could not figure out how to keep a sense of movement and foreshorten the figures. And so I would look to her and like Paul Pope to figure out how to do this, but she really knows how to do it. And I thought that this was a great place to show that. I think the figures here have a lot of movement. I think that her line work here really communicates, this is a person covered in flesh that's moving around. There's a sense of balance, and she used such dynamic poses here. They're dynamic and they seem really natural. So I thought this was really beautiful. I love this drawing. I don't know what it's for. I just love the baby with the mohawk and the Target diaper. I think it's really. I want to know what this is for because it's bananas. I guess, is that Dick Tracy that the baby's holding? I don't know. This is one of the first things I ever saw by her that got me interested. What is this person all about? Yeah, I don't know what the cops are about. I thought this one was really fun and playful, and the figures splashing around and falling, and I really get a sense that these these figures are moving. you know. And what's so fun about her illustrations are sort of how, the backgrounds are gestural too. The water has so much movement to it. Um, I really love this one. The composition is great too. This is a piece she did of, I don't know, I guess it's Freddie Mercury performing at the Super Bowl. Um, really great stuff, and I know from a lot of her work she's capable of drawing like really accurate anatomy, you can tell kind of chose not to here in service of composition and in service of keeping a good gesture. Sometimes, drawing things a little bit inaccurately just keeps things really a lot more interesting. Um, so, again, another boxer figure. I thought this was great. Yeah, a lot of movement here. A lot of just a great figure in general. Um, I think this is excellent. Uh, so yeah, a lot of figures moving around. I think there's a ton of expressive movement here. They're all doing things very deliberately. What those things are, what they're related to, I have no idea, but it's excellently drawn, and I'm a big fan of this. Bill Sienkiewicz. I love Bill Sienkiewicz. So, these have strong gestural underpinnings. These are from a book he did in the 80s called The Shadow. One of the things I like about his work is that it's timeless. Even the color scheme is, it looks like it could have been done now. So, if you look at what he's doing here, a lot of it is these gestural marks with a nib, especially, here in this guy's face. Sorry about that. This fella back here. And you'll notice he's not really anatomy and accurate wrinkles and the clothing and all that. It's all secondary to just having a solid gesture. This is not an anatomically accurate hand, but it resembles one gesturally, right? So that's what we're aiming for. Albert Dorn. This guy was an illustrator in the 30s. When I think of artists that have a perfect combination of realism and cartooning, I think of this guy. He really knew how to draw figures in an interesting way, and it has all the power of cartooning with some realism stuff in there too. Really powerful work. If you can ignore the whatever. All right. Again, look at this hand. It's beautiful. Nobody's hand actually looks like that. But, with these kind of, it's not anatomically correct, but it works. It is showing that she is surprised by this man with the harmonica, getting in her face. I guess his hand is around her. Well, it's kind of not appropriate. Didn't notice that. She's off put by him. This is done in the 30s. There's a lot of texture in here too, but a lot of this is big, thick gestural lines. Big, thick gestural lines that are just kind of organized in a way that communicate movement. Here are what his pencils looked like. They're pretty tight, loose enough. I think it looks really nice. This is you can tell from an expressive standpoint, this man is contemplating. He didn't just give the man an inquisitive face. He placed the man's hand on his head. These are the kinds of decisions that we want to make in comics, where we're using the whole body, not just using a face. And Dorn does that well here. again, we want to exaggerate things, and I thought that uh, he exaggerates this baseball player in a really unique way. Um, Specifically, the knees and his legs. That is, that's what it. When baseball players hit the ball, like their legs look weird in a very distinctive way, and he was able to capture that and exaggerate it to a point of absurdity. But it's it's walking that fine line of working and looking strange, but I love it. That's the line I like to walk. This is more Dorn. Um, Again, uh, great expressive. It's a big fight. There's a lot of movement. You can tell the way that he has organized the lines and the shapes, especially with the wrinkles and these people's clothing, just to indicate a lot of movement. Um, so, Jack Kirby. I want to show you this because a lot of the artists I've shown have strong gesture and really good anatomy. Uh, by anatomy, I mean accurate muscular structure. And what I want to show is that you don't really need to have an understanding of that to draw expressive figures in comics. Jack Kirby was like a genius cartoonist, and his anatomy, technically speaking, was not accurate, but his expressive gestures did the job. Um, Especially if you look at the way he did arms and legs, it's just not the actual shape of the muscles. If you look here, right, this guy's that's just not what is happening. It looks like good anatomy, but it isn't. It's these are gestures with a bunch of shapes that are aesthetically pleasing that resemble good anatomy, and really, that's all you need. Um, I learned anatomy. I like drawing with anatomy. I like drawing with accurate anatomy. That's something I did for me, and I think it's worth investigating. But ultimately, the essence of good expressive figure drawing is achieved in the gesture stage. So, again, more kind of wonky anatomy. Um, those knees. Like, not a, they resemble real knees, but they're not quite there. Same with the leg muscles, and this guy's arm, right? The armpit. That's just not the shape of an armpit. There's other stuff going on. The musculature of his left arm is just not what you would see in an anatomy textbook, but it works because the gesture works. Um,
Wesley Allsbrook. She is an illustrator who I think is also from New York City. Um, I really idolized her when I was doing illustration. Um, Her inks are real crazy. Her figures are really crazy, and there's a lot of gestural movement to them. Sometimes she uses ink, and sometimes she doesn't. You can always tell that it's hers though, because specifically because of the shapes she uses with gesture. And I think that will become clear. Um, Again, these are digital. I think they're digital. I guess they could be gouache. But I just love her gestures and her cartooning, and her color theory. Really just beautiful, genius kind of stuff. Um, I always felt like I always looked at her stuff and thought, this person does not. She gets recognition, but you know, she should. I always thought she was kind of underrated. I love Wesley Allsbrook's work. Um, Again, look at that greyhound. Look at his leg. Is that accurate? No. It works. It's beautiful. I just love the way she draws these figures. And I love in her illustrations how she makes the gestural element, she puts that in the forefront. That's the first thing anybody would notice looking at this. The gestural element and the how the gesture bleeds into the background and bleeds into the objects. Everything feels like it's alive and moving. Really beautiful stuff. I love it. I guess this guy's climbing up a mountain. With her stuff, clarity is secondary to the beauty. Then I'm okay with that. Because it's so beautiful. And again, I love the gestural quality bleeds out of the figure and into the background, so to speak. Everything's alive. And things get so abstracted with her, which is another reason why I admire her work so much, because gesture is an abstraction. We have an image in our head of what a figure should look like. We can kind of approach that image, but we never quite hit it. But she goes right... I'm not explaining this very well. She abstracts the figure in a way that communicates a greater reality about what the figure looks like and how it moves. She's communicating something that you can't see in a figure, but that anybody can kind of feel. And then pushes that even further. And that's what I think excellent cartoonists can do. They might tame it when they're doing comics for the sake of clarity, but I think that if a person... The way that I handle gesture is that I would abstract things nearly to this extent and then try to maybe make it look a little more real afterwards. But if we can achieve this level of abstraction in our gesture, then that is a great place to be. Reality can wait. Let's just make beautiful gestures. Again, great stuff. I don't know what most of this is for. She does a lot of stuff for Nautilus and what's it called? Plan Sponsor, I think. Yeah. I love this. This one is, again, lots of figures. Everything's alive. Everything's moving. She's taken the structure of the figure and saying, well, it's more important than accurate structure, line work that communicates movement and prioritizes that. That's why you have such interesting sort of deformities, especially in the woman's arm in the foreground. Longer lines look more gestural. So that's what she went with. It looks beautiful. Oh, I love it. And central figure. I like how the drapes and the figure move along with her hair. I love this illustration. And then I think this is the last one. I chose this one because I thought, again, she is really going for that heavy level of abstraction, and I think that. One of the things that is so important in making a solid gesture is kind of limiting the number of lines that we use to communicate what we want to communicate. And that is a principle called economy, right? We want to use economic mark making. We want to use as few lines as possible to communicate the most amount of information. And she takes that concept and not only runs with it during the gesture, but throughout the entire thing. And that's what I think is so perfect about this, is that you can see there's not a ton, there are big broad strokes that are made very deliberately, with also a lot of confidence and speed, I guess, um, that communicate a lot here. And she was able to keep those from the beginning into the very end of the illustration. And I think that is really masterfully done here. All right, random gestures. So these are just some gesture drawings that I put in to show what I'm talking about. These gesture drawings here have, if you look at what's being communicated, there is solid understanding of how the figure's weight is distributed, and there is a sense of fluidity and movement. I can't define the fluidity and movement in any kind of technical way, right? But there's a sense of it if you can try to get in touch with the feel of it. Some will have trouble, others won't with that. But this is what we want to work towards. More gestures, right? People fighting and stuff. These are good. They communicate weight distribution, that kind of a thing. So Glenville Pugh is the artist that I think solidly has strong gestures. And I think his means of explaining it is pretty clear and straightforward. And so it is this man's techniques that I will be teaching, because it's also what I used to learn. He was a Disney animator for many years, and then he became an educator. And he has a way of explaining these very intuitive processes in a way that I think is pretty effective to anyone. So that's what we're going to go with. You can see there's a sense of movement here. You can see his lines, there's not a bunch of them, but the few that he has communicate a lot of information. These are more gestures by him. I think they're great. This is what we're going for. If we can do this and just, when we lay out our pages and then stack some structure on top of the gesture, we have pretty solid expressive figures. More gestures from him. I think these are wonderful. So, yeah, I'm going to include this presentation, I think, in the class. So, there we go. I love this one. Again, it's nothing, there's not a robust amount of drawing here. It's just solid communication, fluidity, weight distribution. This is what we want to achieve in the gesture. More quick gestures. This is all we're going for with a gesture. We're not going for anything fancy. We want to strip down any kind of detail. We're even going to ignore proportion for the most part. I mean, we want it to be kind of proportionate, but what we really want to get is weight distribution and fluidity. And that's it. Thank you.